Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic, let's do it. The rural folk. What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen or experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. We live on 5.5 acres in the middle of nowhere. We see shadow people all the time. We ignore them, but it's creepy AF. Thankfully, we bought a house in town, and we're moving in a few weeks. Here in North Texas, a cryptid known as Lake Worth Monster, or the Greer Island Goatman, is said to roam Greer Island and the surrounding area near Lake Worth. Although this story doesn't take place at the lake, it takes place by another close lake. I'm not going to share this specific lake for privacy reasons. Anyway, when we were kids, my cousin, 8 male, lived by this lake, and my sister, 10 female, and I, 12 male, as well as his other cousin, 13 male, were invited over for the weekend. When we were over, we heard strange noises during the night, similar to an elk bugle. This was the loudest when my uncle drove us through the woodland on the shore. One night, when staying up, playing Animal Crossing, about 2012, New Leaf had just released, we heard these noises and looked out the window to see a gray, hairy, humanoid figure with horns and hooves standing on the neighbor's roof. Needless to say, this was the most terrified I'd ever been. After this, we just hid in his room, closed all the windows and blinds, and then made a fort, so we felt safer. We didn't get our aunt and uncle, though, because he had a baby shower that we did not want to disturb. After all, we thought the crying would attract it. Driving down a bumf nowhere hill road, commonly called the shortcut to the locals. Called that because it went straight up a massive set of hills and straight down. It was carved and made by local people to avoid having to go all the way around, which was a solid extra 30 minutes, depending on construction, logging, the local gravel and soil company, etc. Well, this route is about 10 minutes long if you're going the average 50 miles per hour that people usually do. But I felt weird about the road that night. It was about 1 p.m. I was heading home from a long trip I spent with some friends, and I was alone. It didn't feel right. I hadn't taken the route much prior to that, but I was tired and didn't want to waste time getting home. So I'm driving down the road at about 30 miles per hour, and I notice a slight orange or brown haze coming just above the nearby trees on my left. I figured it was a car, but the road curved to the right at this place and went straight from there, so there couldn't be any headlights coming from that direction. I slowed down, thinking maybe someone had gone off the road, but I couldn't see the origin of the lights. Deciding best not to be the curious, stupid person in the budget horror movies who checks something out alone, I just pulled my handgun from my holster and set it on the center console just in case. I slowed to a stop as I came up to the curve so I wouldn't move away from the lights. That's when I found out the lights were moving, ever so slightly at first, then gained some speed, kind of diagonally toward me, but would have passed me. That's what I saw it peek through the trees. It's hard to effing describe outside of miniature electric sun. The best representation I've seen is the electrical anomaly in Metro 2033. Imagine that, but orange and more fiery, plasma-y than electrical. It moved through the trees, and I noticed it would sort of stick an arm out to touch the trees it passed, like a little lightning arm. It would start a little fire whenever it touched something, but seeing as these were all giant live pines, and it was a rather wet area, valley between two hills, and fires don't start on live wood easily, the fires would go out pretty quick on their own. Then it struck some dead birch trees, and oh boy, did those light up quick. This seemed to give it more energy, and it sped up and avoided a couple more trees before smacking straight into a big great oak. It blew up like a grenade, disappeared, and set that side of the oak on fire. I called the fire department because that shit wasn't going out anytime soon. Fast forward a bit, they put it out relatively easily. It hadn't grown much, and they had one of those big effing off-road brush fire trucks. Police came and questioned me. They thought I started the fire, and that I committed arson. Mid-question, a dude from the fire department rolls up and says there's lightning scarring on some of the trees and in the dirt, and that it wasn't arson. And the fire followed a specific path that didn't include a lot of dry stuff. After a confusing hour of back and forth, they chalked it down to a destructive event of ball lightning. That remains my only experience with it, and I'm glad I haven't seen it since. That shit was effing scary. No one will ever believe it, but my friends and I encountered a Wendigo while camping on the Appalachian Trail in 98 or 99. There were 3 of us. We were in a tent, all of us asleep, when we heard heavy footprints, like a horse, and the air went from warm and humid to shivering cold. I could see my breath. The tree frogs, crickets, and whippoorwills all just stopped making noise. The moonlight cast a shadow of a short, gangly figure about 4 feet tall, walking by the side of the tent. Hooven feet, skinny arms, long fingers like Freddy Krueger, and what appeared to be small antlers. It had labored breathing was all I could hear until I heard one of my buddies whisper, "The fuck is this? You seen this shit?" The unmistakable stench of roadkill filled the air. Then, it started fumbling with the zipper of the tent. After a few seconds, there was a low, guttural growl, almost like frustration. I swear to God, it said, "Let me in." My buddy grabbed a road flare, lit it, and busted out of the tent screaming, "Get the hell out of here!" We didn't see anything, but movement in the bushes. Then the tree frogs and nightjars went back to making their usual racket. The whole rest of the trip, it felt like something was following us. Ball lightning is such a odd concept. I'd never heard of it before I started reading these stories years ago, and I hear the instances, and have you ever seen any of it? This is a bit of a long one, and it's about camping. I've mostly lived in cities. Friends and I were on a road trip to around the America Southwest. We camp at this isolated state park about 45 minutes away from Zion National Park. Night 1, the tent pole breaks when we try to set it up. My friend's tent was the kind with the poles already in a sheath on the tent, so you just had to extend them. We drive 45 minutes into town to buy duct tape, come back, and all the poles in our tent have been flipped inside out. There are other people around, but nobody gets up to messing with it. Some people come and help us with repairs and offer us dinner. I'm a gay man, and my friend is a woman, so I just didn't want to answer questions from anybody in rural Utah. My friend goes to dinner anyway. A person in a different group said he hated foreigners, so I felt uncomfortable being another minority. Spends time with the family's 7-year-old son and tells them she and I are married for some reason. Next day, I'm a wreck. I'm exhausted and assuming these people are going to attract us or mess with us more. No proof they did, but the tent situation was really weird. We get back and quickly go to bed, avoiding all of our campsite neighbors. That night, I hear sticks breaking near our tent. You can hear the wind howling for a solid minute before it hits our tent each time, and it's a full moon. At about 3 a.m., a pack of coyotes walk through the camping ground, hooting and hollering and howling at the moon. I literally felt like I was going insane. I was so tired. The whole thing felt so surreal. Next morning, my friend says she had a nightmare that the family's young son was at our door asking to come in because he was scared. She knows vampire lore and knew something was off, so she didn't invite him in and said his voice got demonic. and he was clawing at the door in the tent, screaming. She also said that was the most real feeling nightmare she's ever had. Needless to say, the next morning we got up and never looked back. I was once on a farm sleeping in this camping tent with my best friend. He wakes me up and goes, "Bro, I have to pee." But we were far from the house, like mid-forest, I say. "Just pee on the grass or whatever." And he answers, "Look at that fire pit." We'd made one before gone sleeping. I look, and there are two gigantic, creepy shadows being projected on the tent. We panic, but we calm each other to sleep. An hour or so later, he wakes me up again, and he's crying, saying, "Bro, I'm gonna die. I can't hold my pee." The shadows are still out there. They're like 7 feet tall. Maybe my 12-year-old mind exaggerated that. We cry ourselves to sleep again, but he's almost pissing himself. 20 minutes later, we're awake again because he obviously couldn't hold it. The shadows are gone. We get out of the tent, and he wants to go to the house to pee. It's a mile away, but he'd already pissed his pants a little, so that gave us a little more time. We walk through this effing forest with a souvenir flashlight for minutes. Just years later, I realize how stupid and lucky we were. There were like 6 snakes per inch there, but we made it to the house. We're getting close when we look the opposite way. There's a soccer field, and there were the same 2 giant scary shadows wandering around at 3 a.m. Why not? We sprint full speed to the house, enter the bathroom together, and start panicking again. He can't hold the pee. I just turn around and he pees as quietly as possible. He gets up, we hug. He didn't wash his hands to be quiet. Pretty gross now, I see. And try not to cry. But we hear footsteps out the house. The door knocks. We're shivering, but quiet. Not a single word or sound. "Who's in there?" says the voice out the door. We hear a key. It's turning the lock. It unlocks the door. We are crying, hugging as hard as we can, praying, and the door opens. It's the house's owner, his uncle. We were so panicked, we forgot he was there. We tell him everything. We cry, we stutter and sob, but we ask him to go outside. He sighs and says, "Fine." When he opened the door, we got in shock because he looked surprised. The surprised expression slowly turns into a laughing face as he realizes something. It was really creepy. We ask, "What's up?" He goes, "The horses broke the fence and escaped." We go with him, take a look, and there were 2 horses in front of the house. They were his uncle's. We laugh nervously and sleep in the house. The biggest oof in my life. My parents' old home was in the boonies, but we were in a neighborhood. Just the houses were super spaced out. Anyway, my grandmother lived in a little cottage in the back of the land, and about a year before she died, she kept telling us that someone was breaking into her house and moving things. Now, she was really damaged with cancer at the time, and my parents figured that was causing her to imagine things. But she kept swearing things were moving when she would come back to the house. Dad checked the house. No sign of forced entry. Nothing. Flash forward 2 years, and my brother moves in. Everything's great. And then there's this new puppy. Starts getting really sick. One day he comes home and sees that the puppy is in his kennel, but he throws up. And inside his kennel is my brother's high school letterman jacket from the closet. Then, a few days later, a blanket from his bed is across the room. He didn't do it. The dog in the kennel didn't do it. But no forced entry. Nothing. Flash forward another year. First, brother moves out. Second moves in. Then it really kicks up a notch. Somebody moved a photo from the fridge to the sink. Reorganizing his room turned his TV around. My brother is a little rough around the edges, so he decides he wants to booby trap the house. That's illegal, so instead, he places a tiny line of flour on the inside of each doorway. Comes home one day, and there's footprints coming in and out of the house. And once night, we chased a shadowy figure off the land. We changed looks several times. My dad is a cop, and he said unfortunately, because nobody has done anything wrong, they can't quite file a report. They eventually installed floodlights and cameras, but I guess whoever was doing that decided no more. It would have all been a funny experience if A, they weren't harassing an old sick lady, B, we think their reason the dog got sick because he went to another home after, and they never had any issues, and C, I don't care who you are, don't break into people's personal houses.